Corla. Let me start on a positive note, Minister, and welcome the €5 increases for almost all social welfare payments and the new provisions for the self-employed that go some way to addressing the unequal way they are treated, including the provision now of an invalidity pension and the extension of treatment benefit, including access to dental and optical benefits. But to delay such necessary changes to December 17 is unacceptable, and certainly the package doesn't deal with all of the issues raised by the self-employed, who have that group, as has been repeatedly pointed out in this chamber, are the backbone of employment in this country. I also welcome the reversal of cuts to pharmacists, the introduction of the paternity benefit, the partial restoration of the Christmas bonus, amongst other positive provisions. However, what I deplore is the utter failure, unfortunately, by the Department to do what they should be doing. And one of their 4 aims, one is to combat fraud, which they do very well, having had the guards on the roads in Galway and the revenue in relation to tax fraud, although it only consists of a minor fraction of the overall budget of over 19 billion. But one of their main functions is to advise the government and formulate appropriate social protection and social inclusion policies. And I believe the Department, the government and the Minister, unfortunately, has utterly failed to deal with that. Because if they had looked at any of the research available, they would realise that inequality is deepening. And the gap between the rich and the poor, which is repeatedly quoted from this side of the chamber, is not a cliché. It's actually happening. So if we look, for instance, at Social Inclusion Ireland, if we look at the task report, if we look at this latest report from NUIG, which I've downloaded and read in relation to the lone parents and the detrimental effect of driving lone parents, 90% of whom are women, into the workforce, it's actually made them poorer. Now, I know, Minister, that you didn't introduce that. It was the Labour Party, unfortunately, but you have done nothing to rectify that in this budget. And so, notwithstanding a one-liner in the annual report from the Department of Social Protection that income inequality is largely unchanged, that's page 28 of the Department's own report, they utterly fail to advise the Government on policies that might address that inequality. Social transfers keep half of the Irish population out of poverty. 1.6 million people receive a social welfare payment, and when qualified adults and children are included, almost 2.1 million people benefit from the payments. That amounts to almost half of the Irish population who would be at risk of poverty without social transfer payments from the Department of Social Welfare. Now, they're the figures from the Department itself. Further, there is any amount of up-to-date independent research confirming that we have a most unequal society, with the gap continuing to widen. Now, Minister, I would ask you to actually look at that, because I'm not here to complain or to be negative. I'm here to pressurise the Government to change the policy to save the taxpayer money in the end, because if we lessen the divide, we will have a healthier society and a wealthier society. And indeed, TASC in 2016, economic inequality in Ireland, they have 18 indicators, and on all of those indicators they show this year that economic inequality is worsening in Ireland. Now, they're policy decisions. As has been demonstrated internationally and repeatedly, a rising level of economic inequality, such as we are experiencing in Ireland, jeopardises the sustainability of the recovery, both economically and socially. Now, this is something that I can never understand, and perhaps again, for the third time in the last 2 weeks, I used the word naive in relation to myself. But I simply have difficulty in understanding how a government can't understand that different policy decisions will result in a better society for most of us, and therefore saving money in the long term. For instance, we have almost up to 20% functional illiteracy, a static figure for a very long time, absolutely no measures in here at all. One of the most direct measures of helping poverty is to increase the direct child benefit, no increase whatsoever. The lone parents, as I've referred to, are being pushed, 90% of whom are women. And again, the whole theme through this budget, unfortunately, is absolutely anti-women in terms of lone parent, where 90% are women, in terms of the gender gap in pensions, and in terms of carers. Now, it was mentioned already, I think, about the AAA in relation to carers, and I totally agree with them in relation to absolutely no increase in carers. And again, there's a startling figure here, which really, I'm going to say, over 60% of the current budget for the provision of services for older people goes towards long-term residential care. 60% of the budget for long-term residential care, while only 4% approximately of the over 65 population live in residential care. So a policy decision has been made to fund one side, and the other side, the carers who are saving the state an extraordinary amount of money, don't get even a €1 increase. Now, these are policy decisions that are happening all of the time, and I really have difficulty with them, because it would save money in the long term if we did it differently. And if we go back to domestic violence, again, I've quoted the figure repeatedly, 2-point-something billion at a cost to the economy on an annual basis because of our failure to deal with it. And not alone are we failing to deal with it, but we actually have reduced year after year the money available to the organisations who specialise in helping people who are subjected to domestic violence. Now, there are many other points I can make, but my time is limited, and I'm going to just mention one or two other matters. One is the job path, and this has been mentioned by Deputy Penrose. It is my experience in Galway as well that this new job path under CTEC and Turris Nua is the subject of the most serious concerns. And if we look at Connemara, where there are community employment schemes, they cannot get people for those community employment schemes, which are providing essential services in a rural area, because they have no choice but to go on the CTEC to the private company. Now, I have raised this, other TDs have raised this, and we do not get an adequate answer from the Minister. I would hope, Minister, with your particular interest, that you might look at this. We should have learned from JobRich. We should have learned from how these private companies operated in the UK. But when each TD raised this with the Minister, he dismissed our concerns, told us that it was going to be done differently in Ireland, and yet we have seen absolutely no details in relation to that. The final thing I'm going to mention is in relation to rent, and again policy decisions in relation to money and the cost of it for the taxpayer. In Galway City, the Intro building, it's an extraordinary building. It was built not for social welfare. It was a property owned by the City Council in Galway for the people of Galway. It was given over for a project that ended up in receivership. And rather than the government getting any social dividend from that, they are now paying over €500,000 per year, year after year, for a rented building in Galway City. And that's only one of the buildings that the social welfare, through the Office of Public Works, are renting year after year. Now, I would say it's an absolute waste of money. And I have to ask the question, what social dividend did Galway City or County get, or any other city get, from NAMA, or as a result of all of the banks we bailed out? As I speak, this is a building in Galway which was previously used by the Anglo-Irish Bank and has remained empty, while the City Council rent premises, the library is rented in Galway City, the social welfare building is rented, and so on and so on. Absolute money down the drain that could be going into essential services. I'll leave it there because my time is up.